In our last video, we used HTML to lay out the structure of our website. In this video, we're going to learn how to use CSS to style our web page. So to create styles, what you're going to do is under the title part here in head, you're going to create another tag, and the tag is called style, S-T-Y-L-E. And then in between these two opening and closing style tags is where all of our CSS is going to go. So CSS is a set of rules for styling the elements of your web page. What you're going to do is you'll say the name of an element. So for instance, let's take our paragraphs. So you'll say P, because P is the name of our paragraph tags here. And then you're going to type an open and closing set of curly braces. VS Code will probably add the closing one for you. And now in between this opening curly brace here and this closing curly brace here are all of the style rules we're going to give paragraph tags. For instance, one of the style rules I might add is to make the font a little bit bigger. So for that, I could say font dash size, colon, and then we put what size we want. So you can try out a few different sizes. Let's try 2 EM. If I refresh the page, then you see my text shows up a lot bigger. Now you can choose for yourself what size of text you want. I think I usually like 1.5. I like that a little bit better. There we go. I like that, 1.2. We can also add on other rules here for our paragraph tags. So for instance, we could say something like color, and we could set the color of them to dark blue and semicolon. It's very important. Do not forget to add the semicolons. The way the CSS rules work is you have the name of it, a colon, and then whatever value it has, so either 1.2 EM if it's a font size or dark blue if it's a color, and you have to include the semicolon at the end of them. The semicolons are very important. You cannot forget them. It will break all of your styles. The semicolons at the end are how we tell CSS that we're done with this rule and then we're moving on to the next rule. We can also add in some other rules here. So those are rules for our paragraph tags, but let's add some rules for the body. So one of the rules I most frequently use for the body is setting a background color. And to do that, we'll say background dash color, and we'll set it equal to, I'm going to do mine as black. If I reload the page, you'll see now my background color has switched to black. And I'm actually going to change the color of the text to white so it shows up a little bit better. There we go. I also would like everything to be centered on my page. So for the body element in my styles, I'm going to add the rule text align center. Oops, I spelled that wrong. And then if I save it and refresh the page, you'll see everything gets pushed into the center. By the way, you might notice that sometimes VS Code will start auto-completing things for you. So for instance, if I type in color, it'll start predicting what it is. Feel free to use those. If you click on one and hit enter, it'll complete it for you. And then it sometimes will even give you a list of all the different values it could have. Anyways, we're not adding a color to the body. We're just doing that. I just wanted to show that. Let's also change the background color for our buttons so that they look a little different. So I'm going to create a set of rules for the button element. So for buttons, I'm going to create some rules, and the rule is going to be, I'm going to set their background color equal to, let's say, I'll do dark slate gray. That seems like a fun color. Actually, now that I'm writing this, what I think I want to do is have one of the buttons be one color and the other button be a different color. But I'm going to run into a bit of a problem, because right now the way we do styling is we say for all of our buttons on the page, they are all going to follow this set of rules inside of these two angle brackets. We need a way to disambiguate these two elements, because as far as the computer is concerned, these two buttons are basically the same thing. It's like having two kids in your class named Jack. Like, you have to call one like Jack A and the other like Jack like M or something, because you have to have some way of telling the two apart. We run into the same problem with computers. So what we do is when we have two elements with the same name and we want to disambiguate them, add a distinction between them, we give them sort of a nickname. So we would say button, and then before this closing angle brace here, we would say ID, and ID is an attribute that we can add on to our button. I haven't mentioned this yet, but these quotation marks are very important. You're going to have them around almost anything inside of your attributes. So for the source, the road, the alt, the road, they all need quotation marks around them. So our ID in quotation marks, we could say something like button 1. It doesn't have to be fancy, it just has to be unique. It has to be the only thing ID'd is button 1. And then this one we can ID it as button 2. So now instead of having a rule for all of our buttons, I want two different rules. So whenever I'm selecting something by an ID instead of by the name of the element, I'm going to use the hashtag. and we're going to say the name then of the ID. So in this case, it's going to be button 1. See, because that's our ID right here. And then it's the same set of rules. It's just like what we did up here. Between the opening and closing curly braces are going to be all of our rules for just the button that has the ID button 1. So for just this button on the left here. So for this one, I can say background color is red, for instance. And then for my other button, I can say button 2, because that's the idea of my second button. Background color is blue. There we go. And so now I have 2 buttons with different attributes. But now what happens if I do want to change something about both of the buttons? For instance, I think they look really boxy right now. I'd like to make them a little bit bigger, and I'd like to make the edges a little bit more rounded out. So how do I do that? Because I don't want to have to retype those rules for both button 1 and button 2. Well, the nice thing is we can always go back and select all buttons again. So if I just type in button, the element button, all buttons on the page, I can create a set of rules for all buttons that will apply to all buttons, and then these rules will go on top of that. For anything called button 1, it will also be colored red, and for anything called button 2, it will also be colored blue, along with all of the rules I give all of the buttons on my web page. For instance, I could change border radius to, let's say, 20 pixels, and you'll see when I refresh that, that's going to make these 2 buttons a little bit more rounded. And I'm also going to make them a little bit bigger. So I'm going to say font size, and I'm going to change it to maybe 1.5 EM, and add a semicolon and refresh the page. And there we go. Now I have some slightly bigger buttons. I'd also like there to be a little bit of space between this button and this button. To do that, I can add something called a margin, and the margin is just the space in between 2 elements. So we're going to add a little space between these 2. To do that, I'm going to say margin right, and then let's say 20 px, 20 pixels. So what that's doing is saying on the right side of button 1, we're going to add 20 pixels of space, which goes right here. And so there we go. You could change these numbers to whatever you want. You can make them really big, throw them all the way on the other sides of the page, do whatever you want here. There are about a million other style rules we can use in CSS. So for instance, let's say you want to change the color of your border. What I would do is just open up a new tab in Google and search CSS change border color and hit enter. And you're going to find resources. W3 Schools is a really good one. You can click on them and they're going to show you exactly how to do it. So they'll say whatever your element is, you'll say border-color, colon, and then the name of the color. So I could say for my buttons, I could say border-color is green, for example. Now if I reload my page, we changed our border colors to green. You can't see them very well, but there they are. That's how CSS works and how you change the look and styles of your website. In the next video, we're going to talk about JavaScript and how to actually make these buttons functional and create our choose your own adventure story with changing elements on the web page.